I just wanted to read a short passage from this incredible book, The City and History by Lewis Mumford. It was published in, I believe, the 60s, maybe sooner, 1961. And I found this particular passage to be kind of prophetic and just very relevant to kind of what's going on in the modern era with automation and hyper-industrialization and so forth. And I think this passage has probably never been more relevant than it is right now. When Plato turned his back on the disorder and confusion of Athens to rearrange the social functions of the city on an obsolete primitive pattern, he also turned his back, unfortunately, on the essential life of the city itself, with its power to crossbreed, to intermingle, to reconcile opposites, to create new synthesis, to elicit new purposes not predetermined by the petrified structure itself. In short, he rejected the potentiality, not unrelated to what Plato would have regarded as inadmissible confusion, of transcending race and caste and overcoming vocational limitations. He saw no way of unifying the divided selves of man without freezing them into so many fixed, graded, and classified parts of the polis. So strictly did Plato sort out the classes in his ideal city, the philosophers, the warriors, the craftsmen, and the husbandmen, that he returned to the order of an insect community whose social adaptations are sealed in biological structures that have remained unchanged for tens of millions of years. What he did not suspect, apparently, was that this geometric heaven might, in terms of man's suppressed potentialities, turn out to be a living hell. Till now, mankind has been saved from Plato's dream by its technological innocence and impotence. But we today, who have the means of achieving Plato's ambition without yet having plumbed its horrible implications, would do well to pause and examine the prospect. If we continue in science and technology along the lines we are now following, without changing our direction, lowering our rate of speed, and reorienting our mechanisms towards more valid human goals, the end is already in sight. Cybernetics, medical psychiatry, artificial insemination, surgery, and chemotherapy have given the rulers of men the power to create obedient automatons under remote control, with just enough mind left to replace the machine when its cost would be prohibitive. The polite name for this creature is man in space, but the correct phrase is man out of his mind. Another century of such progress may work irreparable damage upon the human race. Instead of deliberately creating an environment more effective than the ancient city, in order to bring out the maximum number of human potentialities and the maximum amount of significant complexity, our present methods would smooth out differences and reduce potentialities to create a state of mindless unconsciousness in which most of man's characteristic activities will be performed only by machines. Even in the infamous nuclear and bacteriological weapons that already threaten wholesale extermination remained unused, historic man, he who lives in cultural time and space, who remembers and anticipates and makes choices, would disappear. Section 5. The Challenge of Greek Dialectic. Plato's polis might be described as a walled prison without room for the true activities of the city within its prison yard. Yet Plato more than once corrected his bald premise and his naive conclusions. The red-faced protests of Socrates' interlocutors, indeed, the recourse to dialogue, were themselves a kind of admission of Plato's own reservations, though his inflexible logic makes him repeatedly override common sense in cheap, disingenuous verbal triumphs. What could be more preposterous, for example, than Socrates' demonstration that the political leaders of the past in Athens did not know their business, since they were by definition shepherds of men, and if their flock turned upon them, or if the dogs they had trained bit their hands, it was a sign that their government had failed. All that this argument demonstrated was the failure of Plato to understand human character, a failure as deep as that of the old-fashioned behaviorist psychologists today, equally confident that they know how to condition men. It is precisely the psychological distance between men and dogs, between political leaders and dog trainers, that turns every despotic system of conditioning sooner or later into a mockery, as some of the leaders of Russian communism with far greater resources at their command than Plato's guardians by now perhaps begin to realize. The fact is that dog-like obedience is not compatible with human growth, or even over any long period with human existence. Freedom for self-direction is necessary for growth, though this brings with it the possibility of sin, error, crime, imperfection, failure, the price that the living must pay for breaking the civil bonds that would keep them safely undeveloped, easy to handle and shape. And that's the end of the section I'm going to read. Page 177, I think, was probably the most poignant part, at least for me personally. So, yeah, thanks. You can stop.